This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Kamil Khouri, the Free Patriotic Movement candidate, defeated former Lebanese President Amin Gemayel in the by-elections, which were held in the Metn district in Mount Lebanon. The Lebanese Interior Minister, Hassan al-Sabah, announced that Khouri defeated Gemayel by 418 votes. Mohammed Amin Aitani, the candidate for the Future Party, won the Sunni seat in Beirut, which was vacated with the assassination of Representative Walid Aido.
The members of the Free Patriotic Movement, headed by Michel Aoun, celebrated the victory of their candidate over the March 14th Forces candidate, former Lebanese President Amin Gemayel. The battle between the two sides in the Metn district in Mount Lebanon was very intense. The results of the elections made this battle important. With regards to the Free Patriotic Movement, it was a battle to prove that its leader, Michel Aoun, is stronger in Christian areas and capable of protecting their role in complex Lebanese politics. Here, the movement celebrated its win, even though it was by a small margin. This confrontation was said to be the most difficult competition against a candidate who was a former president and part of the Gemayel family, which founded the Phalange Party. In addition, he was running on the heels of public sympathy after the assassination of his son, a cabinet minister and representative of the Shaqir area. Meanwhile, Aoun opponents viewed the results of these elections as an indicative of decline in Aoun's popularity among Christian Maronites in the Metn area, and that non-Maronite Christians, including Armenians and Orthodox Christians who were previously allied with Aoun, helped him win. After the announcement of Aoun's victory, everyone began looking forward to the presidential elections in September. Aoun has been armed with victory in Metn, and the March 14th alliance in the ruling government has been armed with the ability to split Aoun's popularity among Maronite Christians, who include the prominent former Lebanese president. Meanwhile, the Metn elections overshadowed the Beirut by-elections, which were easily won by the future bloc candidate Mohammed Aitani for the Shaqir seat previously held by the assassinated Representative Walid Aido. Members of Hariri's camp celebrated the expected victory, noting their active presence among Sunni voters. They knew that most of the opposition boycotted running for and voting in the elections, except for the People's Movement Party led by Najah Wakim, whose candidate competed in the elections alone. This boycott reflected a decline in voter participation, which was a little over 18%. Gemayel conceded defeat in the Metn elections. He considered the elections lost by votes and not by politics. Gemayel stressed that the Maronite leadership in Metn, who were thought to be with Representative Michel Aoun in the previous elections, belongs to him, since 57% of the Maronites voted for him as opposed to 43% for Aoun's candidate.
From now on, we want to talk about representation. This is the right representation in an area with accurate results. So if we know what happened in Metn, then we know exactly what will happen in Kisrwan and the rest of Mount Lebanon. If they talk about a referendum, then we will welcome one. Let the truth come, especially when it comes to the Maronites' public opinion. After all, I am a Maronite candidate, so I can discuss the Maronites and Christians in Mount Lebanon in particular.
How did the elections go in Sin el-Fil, Sid el-Boushriye, Al-Jdeidi and Burj Hamoud, which have a large Armenian population?
الصورة في هذا الجزء من ساحل المتن تتلخص كالآتي.
One can sum up what happened in this part of Metn as follows. Large turnout ranging between 47 to 55% from the morning until 1 p.m. The numbers of votes received by different candidates varied greatly from one area to the other. The areas of Jdedat al-Metn, Sin al-Fil, al-Takwina, al-Fanar, and al-Jawara received the largest numbers of votes in the Metn. These areas are made of a mosaic of political allegiances, ethnic, and religious groups. Jdedat al-Metn has the largest polling station. Voters started to cast their votes since the election started and continue to do so throughout the day. In all the neighborhoods and intersections of Sin al-Fil, al-Takwina, al-Bushriye, al-Naba, one can find support for the Phalange and the Free Patriotic Movement and their allies. Naturally, the Lebanese army took exceptional measures and intensified their presence to separate between the supporters of the two sides. The high turnout and the intensive security measures received large media coverage. Some media outlets spread rumors in an attempt to sway people's votes for their party.
Just like we said before, these are free elections. Voters have to choose between those who support true democracy, reconciliation, and the unity of Lebanon through dialogue, and those who have a policy of confrontation. The policy of confrontation will not bring stability to Lebanon and will not protect its independence. We are calling on the people of Metn to repeat what they did in 2006 when they gave us their confidence. Together, we will continue in the path of resistance until we reach a true partnership.
There was a large crowd of people near the area where MP Pierre Gemayel was assassinated. His widow and two sons prayed for his soul and called on the people of Metn to vote for President Gemayel as a show of loyalty to Pierre's memory. Meanwhile, the Phalange election efforts were intensified on the ground, and some of its representatives predicted victory in advance. Jdedat al-Metn is one of the largest polling stations in the coast, followed by Burj Hamoud, which has a large Armenian population. The overwhelming majority of Armenians voted for the Tashnak party.
I want to tell you that there were people who voted for and against the Tashnak party, but the overwhelming majority of Armenians came to vote for the Tashnak party and supports its decision to form an alliance with Olmert.
There's a large number of Shiite voters in the Metn coast who overwhelmingly supported the candidate for the Free Patriotic Movement. According to representatives from their election campaign, they received more than 2,500 votes out of 4,000.
I voted Dr. Kamil Mansour al-Khouri.
Why?
Because we support them.
Why do you support Michel Aoun?
We vote as Mr. Hassan Nasrallah wants us to vote. We are indebted to Aoun because he stood with us during the aggression. He stood with us all the time. This is why we supported him and are returning the favor.
I voted for Kamil Mansour al-Khouri because General Aoun wants us to vote this way. We will support General Aoun until the very end.
Why?
Because Michel Aoun has done a lot of good things for us. He is honest whenever he talks with anyone. We are behind General Aoun.
على مستوى الناخب المجنس ففي ساحل المتن كان الخيار واضح.
The voters in the coastal area of Metn have made their decision clear. Most of them voted for Amin Gemayel because they supported the future party. Today, there were some problems in the coastal area of Metn. In Burj Hamoud, the army stopped a convoy of Kamil Durish-Amoun from the Free Patriotic Movement. Weapons were discovered in one of their cars at a checkpoint. They refused to obey the army's commands and clashed with it. In the area of Naba'a, 3 supporters of Free Patriotic Movement were injured as their convoy was passing the area. They clashed with supporters of the Lebanese Forces Party, thus forcing the army to detain members from both sides. The elections in Metn ended today after it has become a battlefield for an internal political struggle. Regardless of the results of these elections, nothing will change the fact that the divisions between Christian Lebanese have deepened and are being used for political purposes.
Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert is currently meeting the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Jericho in the West Bank, the first time the Israeli leader has met Abbas on Palestinian ground.
He says he's there to discuss the fundamental issues on creating a Palestinian state, but our correspondent Walid Batrawi also says the fact the meeting is in Jericho represents a political gain for President Abbas.
Well, first of all, this is a political gain for the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, as he managed to invite for the first time Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and talk about substantial issues like the political horizon and, the two-state solution and means to reach this two-state solution. And the significance is also because Jericho was the first city to be handed to the Palestinians in the West Bank in 1994 after the Oslo Agreement. And it seems that this place, the spirit of the place also might bring Palestinians and Israelis back on track for the peace process. Of course, many issues could be discussed in this meeting. It's all open issues. They cannot resolve everything in one meeting. Different meetings will take place in the future, but at least they're talking about some issues regarding the international conference to be held between Palestinians and Israelis with the presence of the United States and some Arab countries in November in Washington, D.C. Also, the Palestinians want from the Israelis measures on the ground, tangible issues, tangible results on the grounds to be seen by the Palestinian public, like removing the checkpoints, release of more Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. As well, the Israelis would want from Palestinians to maintain security and prevent any attacks against Israel from the Palestinian territories.
But even as Olmert and Abbas meet in Jericho, the leader of the rival Palestinian faction Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, said nothing can come of the talks.
It is clear that the meetings between Palestinian and Israeli officials are a replay of what happened in the past. It's reproducing a long path that led the Palestinian people to nowhere.
Prime Minister Ehud Olmert today held talks with PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas in Jericho. It was the first time Olmert met Abbas in PA territory. IBA's Eli Wagalanter reports that Olmert is hoping to soon begin negotiations about the creation of a Palestinian state.
Prime Minister Ehud Olmert arrived in Jericho today for an historic meeting with Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas. It was the first time that an Israeli Prime Minister held talks inside Palestinian territory since the outbreak of the Palestinian Intifada in 2000. As one might expect, security was extremely tight, with Palestinian Presidential Guard officials and Shin Bet VIP security officers holding a number of meetings in recent days to lay the groundwork for today's meeting. The two leaders had a private lunch, and most of their meeting was behind closed doors with no aides present. But the big question was, what did the two really talk about at the Intercontinental Hotel in Jericho? I came here in order to discuss with you the fundamental issues outstanding between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, hoping that this will lead us soon into negotiations about the creation of a Palestinian state. But no one on either side was spelling out what fundamental issues means. It is assumed that talks centered on how to arrive at the establishment of a Palestinian state, as well as the borders of such a state, Palestinian refugees, the status of settlements in the West Bank, and the future of Jerusalem.
I believe the situation today is what are the parameters of these issues. Can both leaders make the decisions required to define the parameters of issues? I believe they can. Can they do it in one meeting? No, they can't. How many meetings we need between now and next November? I don't know.
Sources in the Prime Minister's office have said the fundamental issues had to do with building Palestinian governing institutions and discussing in broad strokes the content and contours of a future Palestinian state. Other sources have said that the meeting was also to include Palestinian requests regarding border crossings, checkpoints, and humanitarian aid.
We've had over the last 3 weeks important movement on the Israeli-Palestinian track. We've seen the release of prisoners. We've seen a moratorium on the Al-Aqsa terrorist activists on the West Bank. We've seen the flowing of money to the Palestinian Authority. We've seen the beginning of a political dialogue. We've seen the re-establishment of security cooperation. And I think today's meeting we have to build on what has been achieved and further energize the process of reconciliation. Ultimately, the Israeli government and the Palestinian government, we share a common view of two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace.
Israel's direct concern is to strengthen Abbas so he can realize his authority over the Palestinian territories and combat terror. Both sides are working under the realization that U.S. President George Bush has only a year and a half left in office and was keen on seeing progress. Certainly the impetus for today's talks is the upcoming Middle East Peace Conference scheduled for November. Toward that end, more summit meetings between Olmert and Abbas are planned in the run-up to that international conference. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
The showdown between the Islamic Action Front and the Jordanian government has intensified. Meanwhile, Jordan's Prime Minister Ma'ruf al-Bakhit said that the recent withdrawal of the Islamic Action Front from the municipal election was due to a decline in its popularity. However, the Islamic Front rejected al-Bakhit's comments and said that it withdrew from the elections due to the many violations cited in the voting process.
As soon as the municipal elections went underway in Amman, the Jordanian government and the opposition started to exchange blames and accusations. The relationship between the Jordanian government and the Islamic Action Front has deteriorated after the latter withdrew from the municipal elections, alleging violations and fraud in the voting process.
The blatant fraud and violation that took place in the voting process have indeed dishonored our nation and undermined its will. The government did an excellent job trying to cover up the facts and violate the integrity of the process. Regarding all the promises it has made before the municipal elections, unfortunately, it did quite the opposite.
The Jordanian government blamed the Secretary General of the Islamic Action Front, Zaki bin Rashid, for the crisis. This news comes after bin Rashid has issued a statement to a local newspaper in which he strongly criticized the Jordanian government.
There appears to be personal issues involved in this case. The Jordanian government has accused the Secretary General of the Islamic Action Front, Zaki bin Rashid, of adopting his own regional agenda. The Secretary General used rather strange terms, which we have not heard in Jordan. This is what escalated the problem with the government.
رئيس الوزراء الأردني معروف البخيت شنه أيضا هجوما عنيفا على الحركة الإسلامية.
Meanwhile, Jordan's Prime Minister Ma'ruf al-Bakhit strongly criticized the Islamic Action Front and its Secretary General bin Rashid, whom he accused of hijacking the Islamic movement, and added that bin Rashid may face criminal charges.
أن تتخذ بحقه إجراءات قانونية.
The issue has nothing to do with Zaki ibn Rashid, or the Secretary General for the Islamic Movement, or the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan. The Islamic Movement is now operating outside the national sphere of the kingdom. It represents a faction that takes orders from abroad.
The incidents experienced in the municipal elections have helped widen the gap between the government and the Islamic movement. However, both sides must do what is best for the country and their people, especially considering that the parliamentary elections are around the corner. The dispute and disagreement between the government and the Islamic movement are an old issue. The crisis can be easily resolved in a comprehensive dialogue between the Jordanian government and the Action Front, provided that the government does not go ahead and arrest the symbols of the Islamic movement. For Al Madar program, Nasser Shadid, Abu Dhabi Channel, Amman.
In an exclusive interview with Al Arabiya channel, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shaukat Aziz rejected reports in which some U.S. presidential candidates talked about the use of force in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia if deemed necessary. Aziz stressed that Islamabad and Riyadh enjoyed a strong relationship and his country is a sovereign nation that does not need the help of foreign forces.
Obviously, they talked about use of force.
Obviously, some U.S. presidential candidates talked about the use of force in Pakistani territories. Pakistan is a sovereign nation that has its own security institutions and its own army that we are proud of. Islamabad is capable of defending itself, and we will not allow anyone to violate its sovereignty. The presence of foreign forces in Pakistan is absolutely out of discussion. Some U.S. presidential candidates have talked about a possible attack on the holy sites in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. God forbids. No Muslim or a country will accept this. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan enjoy a strategic relationship, and we will not remain silent if someone tries to harm Riyadh or attack the holy sites there.
President Ahmadinejad arrived in the Algerian capital of Algiers on a two-day official visit at the head of a high-ranking political and economic delegation and was accorded a warm welcome by his counterpart Abdulaziz Bouteflika. Shortly afterwards, the two presidents held a first round of behind-the-closed-door talks. No details are yet out about the content of the meeting, but analysts believe that the regional questions, the issues pertaining to the world of Islam, as well as expansion of bilateral economic and political ties, have taken center stage at the talks between the two heads of state. Later in the day, Speaker of the Algerian People's Assembly, Abdul Qadir bin Saleh, Chairman of National People's Assembly Abdulaziz Ziari, and Prime Minister Abdulaziz Bel Khadem separately met with the Iranian president. Iran has successfully tested a new fighter jet named Azarakhsh. Defense Minister Mustafa Mohammad Najjar said Azarakhsh has been manufactured in cooperation with experts from the Army, Defense Ministry, and HESE aircraft manufacturing industries in Isfahan province. He added the Azarakhsh fighter plane is now at the stage of industrial production, and its mass production will start in the future. The defense chief said the fighter's successful test would lead to plans for making the fifth generation of Iranian aircraft. Mohammad Najjar said Iranian experts are currently working on the second type of Azarakhsh fighters, which would be tested soon. Iranian scientists have successfully built the most powerful supercomputer in the Middle East. Iran is now among advanced countries in possession of the supercomputer technology. Bahman Jabari, one of the project's designers, said with 56 gigabytes of RAM and the storage clustering technology, the supercomputer processor cores 860 can perform billion computations per second. The computer's storage clustering 5, which is about 800 gigabytes, is used in oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, car making, petrochemistry, and aerospace industries, which need high-performance computing. Iranian, Iraqi, and U.S. experts held the first meeting of a joint security committee in Baghdad looking to ease the insurgency in Iraq. The Iranian delegation raised ambiguous security strategy by the U.S. in the war-torn country, saying a change of policy by Washington helps work out a way out of the current crisis. The Iranian experts highlighted Tehran's determination to help Nouri al-Maliki's government restore stability in the country. The Trilateral Security Subcommittee also heard the American side urge Iran's help to tackle the crisis. The Foreign Ministry appointment on Iraq, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, who headed the Iranian team, said Baghdad had requested for housing the embassies during the Iraq neighbors meeting. He added this would prove helpful in restoring security in Iraq. A suicide bomber sped into a village in northern Iraq Monday and blew up a truck packed with explosives, unleashing a massive blast that killed 30 people and pulverized homes. It was the deadliest attack on yet another bloody day in Iraq, where the military announced the deaths of 5 more U.S. soldiers, and the overlapping insurgency and sectarian conflict sent another 15 Iraqis to their coffins. 12 children and 5 women were among the dead, and 14 people were in a critical condition in hospitals after the attack. A police spokesman said 50 people were wounded. Violence further south killed another 18 people, including 9 wiped out when a roadside bomb ripped through an unofficial stop for one of the battered minibuses used by thousands of people in Baghdad.
Iraqi religious leaders in Karbala, Najaf, and Kufa condemned the fatwas that were issued by some Saudi clerics who called for the demolishing of Shiite holy shrines. They called on Islamic governments to stop these kinds of fatwas because they fuel religious strife and cause divisions within the Muslim nation.
Fatwas were issued by some Saudi clerics calling for the demolishing of Shiite holy shrines erected for members of the Prophet's family, peace be upon him. These fatwas generated strong reactions in Karbala and Najaf among Iraqi religious leaders. In Karbala, Sheikh Abdul Mahdi al-Karbulai warned about the dangers posed due to these fatwas, which he considered a direct attack on the holy places and an attempt to divide the Muslim nation. He also called on Saudi officials to stop such fatwas and prevent their publication and promotion.
Officials in countries where these fatwas are issued are urged to interfere. They must not allow the publication of such fatwas, and they must hold those who issue them accountable. Such fatwas have dangerous effects on the Muslim nation and on Islam.
Imam Jumu'at al-Kufa, Sheikh Abdul Hadi al-Muhammadawi.
Sheikh Ahmad al-Muhammadawi, the Imam for Al-Kufa Mosque, condemned these fatwas and the constant American attacks on some Iraqi cities. He had the following to say about the fatwas issued in Saudi Arabia.
بعض علماء الدين في السعودية.
We strongly condemn the fatwas issued by those who call themselves religious scholars in Saudi Arabia. They called for the demolishing of the shrines of the infallible Shi'ite Imams, peace be upon them.
Meanwhile, the Imam of Al-Najaf Mosque, Sadr al-Din al-Kubanji, held the Saudi government responsible for such fatwas and called on Saudi officials to take a clear and serious position against them.
We are still waiting for a more serious position from Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Foreign Minister Saud al-Faisal had announced earlier that his country wants to open an embassy in Baghdad, but that is not enough. They must take a clear position against the provocative takfiri fatwas issued against us. Where is Saudi Arabia?
The Iraqi religious leaders called on the Iraqi political leadership to ease the current political crisis in Iraq and to resolve the crisis created by the withdrawal of the Iraqi Accordance Front through dialogue. This as well was an open invitation to all Arab countries in the region to help overcome the current crisis. What these countries' officials have to say will be the main indicator whether they have serious intentions to help or not. Aysar Ali, Al-Alam, the holy city of Al-Najaf.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters, or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.